little bell above the bakery door gave the same soft silver chime it must have given 10,000 times before, and I stepped in out of the rain, and the smell of the place stopped me exactly where I stood. Honey, warm honey, and melted butter, and something darker beneath it, burnt sugar at the edges, the faint gold breath of cinnamon. A smell I had not breathed in for 50 years, and had never, for a single day, forgotten. I stood on the worn stone step, with the rain still dripping from the hem of my coat, and I was 73 years old, and I was also, all at once, 6. 6 years old, and standing on a kitchen chair in my socks, watching my mother lift a honey cake out of the oven with a cloth wrapped twice around her hands. The young woman behind the counter looked up and smiled and asked if she could help me, and I found that I could not quite answer her. I only pointed with one trembling gloved finger at the tray of small golden cakes cooling on the rack behind her. "That one," I said at last. "What is that one called?" And she said, as lightly as anything, "Oh, that's our honey cake. Old village recipe. We've made it here longer than anyone can remember." I had to reach out and rest my hand on the cool glass of the counter, because the years had just folded together beneath my feet like a dropped ribbon. And for a moment, I was not certain the floor would hold me. But all of that can wait until the morning, because right now, none of it needs anything from you. Not the rain, not the years, not the ache of a memory returning. Right now, there is only you, and the gentle weight of your blanket, and the slow, unhurried rhythm of your own breathing. So let yourself sink a little deeper into the pillow. Let your shoulders come down, away from your ears. Let your jaw soften and your hands grow heavy and warm. I am going to tell you the whole of this story slowly from the beginning. There is nothing for you to do but listen and drift, and let the day dissolve behind you like sugar in warm tea. Let me begin. My name hardly matters for a story like this, but I will tell you that I grew up in this village, in a narrow house on a sloping street, more than 60 years ago. And then I grew up, as children do, and I moved away, first to the city for work, and then further still, until the village became a place I only visited in dreams. And then, eventually, not even there. My mother's name was Eliza. She was a small, quick, warm-handed woman who could make a feast out of very little, and who believed, with her whole heart, that there was almost no sadness in the world that could not be softened by something warm from the oven. And of all the things she baked, in all the years of my childhood, the honey cake was the one that meant home. I can see her still if I close my eyes. The apron with the faded blue flowers, way she would push a loose strand of hair back from her forehead with the back of one floury wrist. The little kitchen, with its low ceiling and its one bright window, and the honey pot on the shelf, and the wooden spoon worn smooth by her hand and her mother's hand before her. She would let me stand on a chair beside her in my socks, and she would let me stir, though I was far too small to do it properly. And she never once said hurry, and she never once said careful. She only hummed some old tune I never knew the name of, and the kitchen grew warm, and the windows fogged, and the whole world shrank down to that small golden room and the two of us in it. She made it on birthdays. She made it on the gray Sundays of winter when the rain would not stop. She made it the day my father came home from the hospital, thin and pale. And she made it the day I left for the city, pressing a whole one, still warm, into my hands at the station, wrapped in brown paper, so that I would have a piece of home to carry with me. The recipe was not written down anywhere. I want you to understand that. It lived only in her hands and in her memory, a pinch of this and a spoonful of that. The honey warmed just so, until it ran off the spoon in a long, slow thread. And when she died, one soft spring morning when I was far away and could not reach her in time, I believed, in my grief, that the recipe had died with her, that it was simply gone from the world, the way a song is gone when the last person who knew it stops singing. For 50 years, I believed that. Now take a slow breath with me. In gently through the nose, and let it out, long and soft, like a sigh at the end of a very long journey. There is no hurry in this story. We are going to follow it the way you might follow a quiet lane through a sleeping village, in no rush at all to reach the end. I had come back that day almost by accident. My husband had been gone 2 years, and the big house we had shared felt too large and too quiet. And one gray morning I had simply got into the car and driven, with no real plan, toward the country of my childhood. To see it once more, I told myself, to say a kind of goodbye. The village had changed, and it had not changed. The war memorial still stood on the green. The stream still ran under the little stone bridge. And the bakery, the same bakery my mother had walked to with a basket over her arm, still stood on the corner of the square, with its small bowed window full of golden things. I had not meant to go in. I had meant only to stand outside a moment in the rain and remember. But the smell had reached out through the open door and taken me gently by the hand, the way my mother used to, and led me inside. And now I stood at the counter, staring at a tray of cakes that could not possibly exist. And the young woman was watching me with soft concern. "Are you quite all right?" she asked. "This recipe," I said, "the honey cake, Do you know where it came from? Do you know how old it is? She tilted her head and thought about it. That I couldn't tell you exactly. It's been in the shop since before my grandmother's time. She always said it came from a customer, a long way back. A gift, she called it. And she smiled. Would you like to sit? I'll bring you one and a pot of tea. You look as though you've come a long way. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. There is nothing more you need to see. Just my voice and the warm dark and the slow unwinding of the story. I sat at a small round table by the window, and the rain traced soft silver paths down the glass. And the young woman brought me a honey cake on a chipped blue plate and a pot of tea, and she sat down across from me because it was late in the day and the shop was empty, and she could see, I think, that I needed her too. I broke the cake with my fingers, the way my mother always said you should, never with a knife, and I lifted a piece to my mouth. And there it was. 50 years fell away. The exact taste, the honey and the butter and that faint dark thread of cinnamon, the crumb neither too dry nor too sweet, the edges caught just golden. It was my mother's cake, not something like it. It, as though her own 2 hands had lifted it warm from her own oven and set it down in front of me. I did not cry, though my eyes were full. I simply sat and let the taste carry me all the way home, all the way back, to a small warm kitchen, and a woman singing quietly to herself, and the rain against a different window 60 years ago. It's good, isn't it? The young woman said gently. People come from 3 villages over for it. It's my mother's, I said, and then, because it sounded so strange, I told her. All of it. The narrow house and Eliza, and the recipe that lived only in her hands, and the spring morning I lost her, and the 50 years I had believed her cake was gone from the world. And the young woman, whose name was Rosa, listened to all of it with her chin in her hands, and when I had finished, she was very quiet for a moment. Then she stood and she said, I think you'd better come and meet my grandmother. Breathe in now, slow and soft, and out, slower still. Feel how heavy your arms have grown, how warm. Feel the bed holding you completely, so that you do not need to hold yourself up at all. There is nowhere you must be. There is nothing you must carry. Only the next quiet word, and the next. Rose's grandmother lived in the rooms above the bakery, up a narrow wooden staircase that smelled, wonderfully, of flour and years. Her name was Agnes, and she was even older than I was, a tiny bird of a woman wrapped in a shawl, sitting in a chair by the window where she could watch the square. Rosa knelt beside her and spoke softly, and told her that a lady had come, a lady whose mother's cake we had been baking all these years. And the old woman turned her face to me, and her eyes, though clouded, were very bright. "Eliza," she said, "just the name. My mother's name in a stranger's mouth, 50 years after I had last heard it spoken aloud in that village." I sat down beside her, and I took her small, dry hand, and I asked her, please, to tell me. And she did. She had been a girl, she said, no more than 14, working in the bakery for a few pennies, the winter my mother came in from the cold. It was a hard winter, the worst anyone could remember, and Agnes's own mother had just died, and the girl was grieving and frightened and doing a woman's work with a child's broken heart. And my mother, Eliza, a young wife then with a baby of her own on her hip, had seen it, had seen the girl's red eyes and her thin coat and the way she flinched from the cold. And she had begun to come in every few days, not to buy anything, but simply to stand at the counter and talk to the frightened girl and warm her a little. And one bitter afternoon, my mother had come in with a basket, and in the basket was a honey cake, still warm, and the honey and the butter she had brought from her own small store, which cannot have been much in a winter like that. And she had said to Agnes, "Come, I'll show you how to make this, so that whenever the cold comes, you'll know how to make yourself something warm. Let yourself drift now. You don't need to follow every word. Let them wash over you like warm water, like the sound of soft rain on a roof when you are safe and dry and held beneath it." She taught her, the old woman said, stood beside her at the big scrubbed table and guided her hands. A pinch of this, a spoonful of that. The honey warmed just so until it ran off the spoon in a long, slow thread. No measurements written down, because my mother did not know them herself. Only the hands and the watching and the doing of it together until the girl's own hands remembered. She gave it to me, Agnes said, and her clouded eyes shone. In the worst winter of my life, a stranger stood beside me in a cold kitchen and gave me something warm to hold on to. I never forgot it, not for one day of my long life. And when my mother moved away some years later, Agnes had kept baking it, not now and then, every single week. And when she grew and married and took over the little bakery herself, she put the honey cake in the window, where it had stayed ever since. I didn't know her name was still remembered, I whispered. I remembered it, the old woman said simply. Every time I warmed the honey, every single time, I taught my daughter to make it, and my daughter taught Rosa, and I always told them the same thing. I said, this cake was a kindness once from a woman named Eliza, when I had nothing and needed everything. And we keep it warm in the window so that kindness never goes cold. Now I want you to stay with me here in the warm, because this is the gentlest part. and I want you good and drowsy before I tell it. I stayed in the village 3 more days. I could not seem to leave. I took a small room above the inn on the square, with a window that looked out over the rooftops. And each night I fell asleep to the smell of bread beginning in the bakery below. And each morning I woke to it too, and it was, I think, the deepest and most peaceful sleep I had known in years. As though the village itself had wrapped a warm cloth twice around my hands and told me gently to rest. Each morning I came down to the bakery, and Rosa taught me my mother's recipe, the one that had lived only in Eliza's hands, and then in Agnes's, and now in Rosa's, and at long last, came home to me. A pinch of this, a spoonful of that. The honey warmed until it ran off the spoon in a long, slow thread. My hands, I found, seemed to know it already, as though they had been waiting 50 years to remember something they had only ever watched. And when my first cake came out of the oven, golden at the edges, and I broke it with my fingers and tasted it, I was 6 years old again, on a chair in my socks, and my mother was there in the warm kitchen with me, singing quietly, closer than she had been in half a century. Old Agnes sat by the window while we baked, wrapped in her shawl, and sometimes she would say, "A little more honey," or "Don't rush it, let it rest," in the exact words I somehow knew that my mother had once said to her. 2 women I loved, speaking to each other across 50 years, through my own 2 hands and a bowl of warm honey. On my last morning, I asked Rosa if I might write the recipe down at last, to carry it home the way my mother had once pressed a warm cake into my hands at the station. And Agnes, from her chair by the window, said, "No, child, don't write it down. That was never how it was given." She smiled, and her small hand found mine. "It's given from hands to hands, warm, with someone standing beside you. That's the whole of the recipe. That's the part that matters. You'll teach someone, one day, the way she taught me. And that's how it stays alive." So I did not write it down. I carried it home in my hands instead, the way it had always been carried. And last spring, when my own granddaughter came to stay, I stood her on a chair in my kitchen, in her socks, and I warmed the honey until it ran off the spoon in a long, slow thread, and I began to teach her. And somewhere, I am quite certain, my mother was in the warm kitchen with us, singing quietly to herself, closer than breath. So let it all go now, softly. The rain and the years and the long ache of missing someone. Let it dissolve, gentle and slow, like honey stirred into warm tea. You have nothing to hold onto tonight. No recipe to remember, no cake to bake, no distance to cross. There is only the warmth of your bed, and the soft dark of your room, and the slow, easy tide of your own breathing, carrying you gently out. Isn't it a lovely thing to know as you drift that the smallest kindness can outlast us? That a warm thing given once on a cold day to a frightened girl can go on being warm for 50 years and longer. That love once given does not really go cold. It only changes hands. Breathe in slow and easy, and out slower still. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Let the next breath be even softer than the last, and the one after that softer still. Rest now, sleep now. I will keep the honey warm and the light on in the bakery window, and I will be here telling quiet stories whenever you need somewhere gentle to go. Good night.